silicon systems. They design and produce the ASICs that go into a lot of different sensors, mostly tire pressure sensors. I've been here for 6 years now.
Thank you. Lauren?
Hiya, I'm Lauren. I am a category officer for Oxfordshire County Council. I started there in October, so I'm still learning quite a lot.
Vince?
Hi, my name's Vince Wright. I currently work for CCS Limited, which is my sister's company. Basically she contracts out to different organisations.
Thank you. And Isabel?
Hi, I'm Isabel, and I'm the Assistant Procurement Officer at Tate, so covering all of the 4 Tate galleries in the UK.
Thank you. So Ali, if you can just introduce yourself and let us know kind of what you get involved in on a day-to-day basis, and then we'll ask everybody to go through their questions for you.
Happy days. Right. Well, thank you for having me. Being asked to come and chat to you as an expert makes me feel like a bit of a fraud, but I'll give you a few highlights of my experience and what I do, and then you can be the judge rather than me. So I work for the RNLI. So for those of you that don't know, that's the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, which quite a lot of people in the country grow up knowing as a charity that runs lifeboats off the coast. What I didn't know till I got there was just sort of quite how big it was. So I run all of the supply chain there, which is 250 lifeboat stations, 300 beaches every summer, and about £30 million worth of bits, bobs, stores, spare parts, etc. that go with it. We've now got 500-ish shops as well. So essentially, I run an in-house logistics fleet and a warehousing operation, and all of the contracting and procurement and 3PL support that goes with it, that covers 1,000 customer locations across the whole of the UK and Ireland.
Wow.
So a bit of a supply chain to manage, and I sort of got there via a slightly strange and bizarre route. So I started my career back in the early 2000s as a mechanical engineer for BAE Systems, working with and designing the Type 45 destroyers that the Navy's still rolling into service many, many years after I left. I then joined the Army as a logistics officer for 9 years. Left that, joined Accenture doing consultancy, but supply chain consultancy for a huge company like that actually turns into doing IT transformations. So it was about taking everyone's ERP system and turning it into SAP for a couple of years. And and then I ended up at the RNLI. So that's sort of a bit of history to date.
Yeah, thanks for that. Nash, could you ask your questions?
Yeah, or it's, I guess, related to what you just talked about. So it sounds like you've been through the private, public, and the third sector during your. So just what are the kind of the biggest changes between them, and how easily was it to bring across your experience and your skills?
For me, I find it splits down into I suppose two different aspects. One is technical skill and ability. Whether you're MSIP, CMILT, you've got masters, whatever, you've got years of experience, everyone's got a variation of technical expertise. That's what all businesses are looking for, because they're looking for you to deliver something in that technical sphere, be it procurement, supply chain, etc. What tends to differ across the sectors, I found, is actually the cultures of the organizations you work for. So the military and Fortune 100 consulting were very similar. It's very direct, it's very time sensitive, it's very high pressure, and it's very kind of, you will achieve this task, you can't fail to achieve this task, and it gets quite well, it's just everyone's wired the same way, and generally it's financially incentivized in the private sector to do it. So people will work really hard because they know their annual bonus is on the line at the end of the day, and potentially their sort of their career. And there's lots of ambitious people. Charity sector is rather the other end. It's lots of people who've got this huge passion and belief in why they are at the organizations and what they're doing there, but don't necessarily have the same level of technical skill, both because there isn't the salaries in the charity sector and the third sector, but they also tend to base themselves a million miles away from big cities. You know, if you look at charities, Cancer Research UK is about the only one that's based in London, where they can recruit whoever they like. You know, the RNLI's down in deepest, darkest Dorset doesn't get an awful lot of people of that sort of caliber living there, particularly in supply chain. In my world, if you want a job in warehousing in the Midlands, they're everywhere. You come down south, they're not. So really, it's just be conscious of the culture of different industries and organizations.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Everything you wanted to ask, Nash?
Yeah, I'll go again. I was just gonna ask, like, what's the is there one standout thing you've implemented or improved that was the biggest impact in your career in the supply chain? One process or yeah.
Pardon me. Yeah, probably the most recent example. And if you go to a bigger organization, you'll be looking for a couple of percent here, a couple of percent there, because they will generally be reasonably good at most things. So you're looking to do that extra little bit to help save some money. If you go into the third sector, you tend to find there's much bigger opportunities. So when I went down to the RNLI, the supply chain in general, everything from procurement through to the warehouse and logistics, wasn't well understood. It was a bit sort of 1970s, a bit Stone Age compared to the rest of the world. So they're on the same journey that a lot of other organizations been on, but quite often the charity sector is a bit further behind. So I took a lot of the experience I had from my time consulting, and the main thing I brought to the RNLI was S&OP, so sales and operations planning. Just turning around to them and going, everything in supply chain is either at risk, have you got a contract, don't you, where's it being sourced from, follow through all the timelines and the lead times to get it to you, but also then what's your planning? So the RNLI is trying, and the RNLI is very unlike most other organizations in this world. It's running a fast moving retail operation. It's running a planned, in theory, manufacturing operation to build lifeboats, and it's running a completely unplanned in-service support. When does my lifeboat break down, and which spare parts do I need to fix it operation? Those are three completely different types of supply chain, all chucked on top of each other in running out of the same warehouse and on the same logistics fleet. Now, in all my years' experience, I've never seen anyone try to do anything quite so barking mad in my life. And I'm the lucky soul who has to try and unpick it all and work out the most efficient and effective way to do it. So bringing the planning concept, the RNLI, to say, well, look, retail is fast moving, spare parts is almost unguessable, and production should be planned. How do you design and implement the supply chain that supports that? And the answer was quite simple. The answer was just ask the question, and then you will start pulling together the answer. And we start looking at different software packages and how to paint that picture that accommodated all of what you will see in your supply chain textbooks in terms of, different products, lead time, storage, movement requirements, and you just build a plan. Very long-winded way of saying planning is quite important.
Yeah, I was going to say, just build a plan. Certainly keeps you on your toes then, doesn't it? Definitely. Lauren, did you want to ask your questions?
Yeah, of course. So I guess the first question was just what made you decide to work in this kind of role for RNLI?
Well, if I'm honest, I didn't. My mother sent me a job advert one day many years ago when I was consulting. I was at Jaguar Land Rover at the time, and she knew I'd loved the RNLI my whole life. So it is as simple as that. She went, "Oh, you'd be good at this," typical mother fashion. I think she might even have cut it at the newspaper and sent me a written note in an envelope with a clipping, because she still does that to this day.
My mum does that.
And yeah, the rest was history. And I suppose the why for me, and it comes from my military days, the sense of purpose in terms of what I do and why I do it. I love supply chain from a geeky technical perspective. It's what I find it really complex and interesting and exciting, as sad as that is to say. But the purpose of the organization. So when somebody said, RNLI lifeboat saving lives, do you want to go and use your supply chain expertise there? Versus at the time I was at Jaguar Land Rover. Now I love Jaguar Land Rover. I like cars. It was a very cool place to go and spend a couple of years, but I couldn't say no to the opportunity to go to the RNLI.
Yeah, fantastic. Did you want to ask your other question, Lauren, as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to know what the most important thing is to consider in your role. I guess might also be what the hardest thing is to think about.
They're both the same thing for me, and this is a non-supply chain specific answer. So for me, it's decision making. You will never have all the information you need to make a good decision. And the one thing I've learned over the years, and this was really something was drummed into us in the army, was a timely decision is far more important than a perfect decision. Sitting around waiting for all the information to make a right answer is, for me, the worst thing you can do. So I've got 50 plus people working for me at the moment. I've got 6 managers reporting into me with all the technical expertise, and what they generally need from me is to not hold them back, is to make those decisions that allow them to get on with the job.
Thank you.
Clearly, how good those decisions I make are come down to, you know, my skill and how much risk I want to absorb, and there's a whole lot of other stuff that goes into it. But if nothing else, it's just I've suffered it in my life from other managers, waiting for decisions that never come, or that by the time they come, it's too late.
I guess that kind of also leads on to what you were going to ask, Isabel. Did you want to ask your questions?
Yeah, sure. So the first question was, what are the main skills from working in procurement that you found to be the most transferable to other roles or sectors?
Good question. They a lot of my answers will be more, I suppose, managerial than they will be specific to procurement. So attention to detail. I spend my life staring at thousands of parts that are all moving, that have all got different lead times, hundreds of contracts, thousands actually of suppliers. Being able to look at the spreadsheets, absorb the detail fast, and then it comes back to what I was saying previously, that allows you to make the best possible decision, certainly not the perfect one, quickly. You will never get beyond it in any job you do anywhere, I don't think. Attention to detail. It minimizes the chance of mistakes and maximizes your decisions. And the other one, which is for me is completely the opposite and is something that's come across to me, really hit me hard in the charity sector, is emotional intelligence. Nobody is going to want to work with you or for you if they don't like you. And a big part of that is actually trying to have a bit of empathy, trying to have a bit of patience with other people. When you think you're absolutely right and it's blindingly obvious and they don't, and you think they're mad, it's probably because they don't have your knowledge and experience. They don't understand. It might be because you don't understand what's going on with them. It's the sort of iceberg thing, you know, what you see and what you know of other people and the way they react, be it in meetings, in and outside of work, you almost never know the full picture. So just trying to sort of grow your emotional intelligence for me is massive.
And do you think that's important in all sectors, or have you found that to be more relevant, particularly in the charity sector?
I think it is more relevant in all sectors. The example I would give you is when we were doing, when I was consulting, we used to spend a huge amount of time characterizing people and mapping them. So we wanted to achieve an effect. Certain people were naturally going to be on side. You know, yes, it's SAP. Yes, it's this IT system. Yes, it's that way of working. Others weren't. And the amount of time and effort we would associate with different key stakeholders in an organization was based on whether they were on side or not. You know, you invest if you need a decision, you invest your time with the person who doesn't agree with you, so you can try and convince them. That for me was the commercial side to it. In the charity sector, again, we're more predicated on lots of people agreeing so you can get on with something. It's a bit less sort of financially driven. So the solution you want where I am currently is you do have to go and do an awful lot of getting everyone on side.
Brilliant. Okay. Vince, did you want to go through your questions?
Yeah, sure. The RNLI, obviously a well-known charity. How do you allow for budget fluctuations based on the donations you get, when the safety of the crew is reliant on regular equipment, upgrades and servicing?
That's a really good question, and I'm very thankful a big chunk of it is not my day job. So financially for the RNLI, we work very closely with the Charities Commission. We have to, because the RNLI is about, give or take, it changes every year, say about a 200 million a year organisation to run. Charities Commission, for obvious reasons, doesn't like charities hoarding lots of money. But building our new lifeboats, they're about, total package is about 3 million each. And organisationally, I think I touched on it, I've got about £30 million worth of kit going around the organisation at the moment, and that obviously gets used up every year and then gets bought again. So what the RNLI tends to do is we have a big pot of money which is essentially RNLI reserves, and that is designed to mitigate against me being able to do my job without having to worry directly about the fundraise money. So a huge part of the organisation is our fundraising directorate, so they concentrate on bringing it in. Then the finance people have a sort of, call it RNLI reserves for lack of a better word, but they have a pot of money that allows us to flex a bit. It is something like 6 months-ish, give or take, of sort of enough to run the business, run the charity for 6 months if everything else stopped, and that was it. Which actually on a 200 million a year is not, it disappears very quickly. So when we looked at cost of living this year and the impact of inflation, we thought the potential impact of inflation to the RNLI was about 20+ million within a year. So that's huge. So that suddenly led to us going, crikey, what do we do? And the answer is you look at all the soft, fluffy stuff that isn't directly going to impact life saving. So would we ever scrimp or save on spare parts for lifeboats? No. Would we say everyone who's got a company car, we might have to restrict your mileage or take your car off you, or all the company cards and mobile phones go away? So you start looking in different directions. But recent years have been a real struggle for us, because it is all fundraised money, and efficient use of it is always key. So we don't operate with the sort of reserves that I suppose a big commercial organisation would have.
Yeah, I guess it's been even more tough for the charity sector than other sectors, really, with pandemic and everything.
Well, as an
Vince?
example, when COVID hit, I had to set up out of nowhere a sort of PPE supply chain, and
Yeah.
it was spend as little money as possible. Don't compete when sourcing with the NHS, which was almost completely impossible. But we had to get lifeguards and lifeboat crews with face masks and all the rest of it on.
Yeah.
And in COVID, when we thought, oh no, all our charitable income will drop through the floor, we had to spend about £1.5 million a year on PPE. So it has been a bit mad recently.
Yeah, definitely. You had a couple of other questions as well, Vince.
Yeah, it's all sort of loaded into one, really, but there's a couple of parts to it. It's basically, how important is sustainable procurement to you? Do you find it hard to source locally, where there are a lot of probably external pressures from abroad on pricing? And if you do source from abroad, how do you find negotiation? Is there a set process that you use, or is it just touch and feel?
Great question. Right. So sustainable procurement is massively important everywhere. It now does not matter where you go. Everyone I know now of sort of my generation is running around going, oh crumbs, we need to get on sustainable procurement courses or environmental, all of this, because we're all a bit, my generation particularly is lacking in that knowledge and understanding, and the speed at which the market is taking up is huge. So we have a sustainability team within the RNLI. It's only a couple of people, but their job is to run around to all the different business directorates and rattle a few cages and go, have you heard about this? Could you do this? This is the first year the RNLI has set specific sustainability goals. So they've come straight to me in supply chain and said, right, Ali, single-use plastics, what packaging are you getting suppliers to use? How's that going through the supply chain? How much black plastic's all going in the bin? So we've got a 2030 target to remove single-use plastic. So our entire retail operation, a couple of years back now, moved to plastic totes. So we use the packaging from the suppliers, goes into plastic totes, goes to shops, we bring the totes back because we run in-house logistics. Massive reduction in cardboard waste. Even though it's recyclable, then you start looking at all the energy used to recycle it. And so that is massive. Carbon footprint's massive. Every single tender we run now has specific clauses, and specific element of it is you as a potential supplier talk to us about your sustainability. Are you carbon neutral? What are your targets? So we effectively get suppliers to sort of pitch us in terms of what they're doing. So it is becoming a competitive and scored metric. And that's something that I've seen change in the last few years, and it's really nice to see. From an organizational perspective, our chief executive has given us the strategy that we are an early adopter, but not a sort of leader. Because again, fundraise money, we have to be careful. The R&D and trying out very early technologies can be actually quite expensive. So our idea is to then go, right, as soon as somebody works out how to run a ship off something that isn't marine diesel, which is one of the most awful polluters in the world, we want to be kind of near the front of the queue to go, right, let's try those engines. But at the moment, that commercial world is still using diesel container ships for a reason. There are Silverstream and a few others. There's some really good technology coming through, but there isn't yet. Not at the sort of speeds we operate our lifeboats out with the size, then we can't quite strap solar panels to the roofs just yet. So it's an organizational intent, but I think a very astute sort of financial and strategic decision to just be an early adopter, because that way, hopefully, because we're always trying to balance, fundraised money versus what we spend it on. Right, that's a sustainable bit. Sourcing locally versus, we source all over the place. Now the RNLI sourcing, particularly if we take lifeboats and engineering equipment, our goal is to get the best stuff in the world if we think it will help us to, you know, even add an extra 1% to the possibility that we might save a life. So we're at a position now, certainly in the UK, where 300-400 people about ish a year dive sort of around the coast, drowning, etc. And we are very much into that. It now costs us a fortune to try and, you know, save just one more of those people, because the service is already, you know, we might do 20,000 rescues a year and still 300-400 people are unfortunately not surviving. So when we look at our engineering team, they design equipment to be absolutely cutting edge. So it's one of the accepted things with us. Our job is to provide the best possible service. The poor fundraising director then gets the challenge to raise the money to support it. So I'm very out of date with this stat, but I think 2-3 years ago, our fundraising director told me it was something like £660,000 per day her department had to raise to keep the RNLI running. And nobody in the RNLI will ever willingly compromise on how good our kit is. So the main engine for our latest lifeboat, the Shannon class, comes from a factory in New Zealand. You know, our sunglasses and some of our lifeguard kit comes from, funnily enough, Australia, because they're quite good at lifeguard kit and equipment. But we also have rescue boards made by a chap called Bob in his garage in a shed down in Cornwall somewhere. So as a procurement person's nightmare, we had 5,000 suppliers when I arrived. We're now down to about 3,000, but we do have everything from Bob in his shed through to, you know, Bosch Rexroth. We've got strategic partnerships with Microsoft and Helly Hansen. So as a procurement professional, as our category managers, the sort of challenge is everything you can imagine in terms of the size and shape and suppliers. But they are all treated the same in terms of sustainability, and we have a sort of standard sourcing template. So I think, and I might get this wrong, I think we took the old government sourcing, which is very heavy-handed process and absolutely rigid within public sector, and we then sort of tweaked it, made it slightly more flexible for us, and just toned it down a bit, I should say. But it's still a structure that we can then use as a comparison across. So all our tenders are sort of fair and understood, and all the suppliers are asked the same questions. And I think the last bit was more onto the sourcing and the Incoterms piece, from what I remember. So we operate around the whole of Ireland. So take that as an example. So Brexit hit me pretty hard. I had to generate a tax and customs clearance office overnight, pretty much, within my team, which caused some fun and games. Now, we, like everyone else trying to ship in Ireland and everyone else in Europe, the customs officials didn't know what they were doing. The paperwork was a nightmare. Nobody understood the system, and the new systems and processes and checks from the people who were supposed to be implementing it to those of us trying to use it. It was chaos. The one enduring problem I still have, because, you know, it's the same as usual. It took time, 6-12 months, and we'd all sort of stumbled our way through. Lots of people got lorries stuck trying to get into Ireland for a few days a week, but most of us managed to make it work. Where I am struggling now, buying stock from suppliers, and the suppliers don't want to deal with the customs clearance and the paperwork, because, you know, if you're a commercial business, you have to hire people to process this stuff. It's incredibly expensive. And there's a load of extra data that we didn't used to have to get that we now need. So we still have stuff turning up now in Ireland from suppliers where we always say DDP on Incoterms. We do not want to get to deal with it. So if I've got the stock in pool warehouse and I'm shipping it to Ireland, I have a team who can do customs clearance. But the suppliers tend to give it to TNT, FedEx, whoever, to their third-party logistics. They don't pay for customs clearance. The product turns up in Ireland, and we then get stuffed with the bill. And trying to get back to the 3PLs to go, oi, what are you doing, is almost impossible. Most of them now have got chatbots, so you can't actually talk to a real person for love nor money. I mean, I think with TNT, unless you're spending about 5 million a year, you won't get to talk to someone. And we spend about 100 grand a year. So, you know, it's, for me, that is something that the market has still not quite wrapped its head around yet. So, and I've spoken to half a dozen different organizations. They've all said the same thing to me, which is recruit someone, train them up in-house so you can unpick whatever manner of problems and issues you get. You know, an internal solution, even if you hire one person, is probably going to cost the organization, I don't know, 6 figures, 100+ K a year, because you need access to the different countries' customs tools and software to do it. So yeah, that's an absolute nightmare for me, Incoterms.
Sorry, I didn't mean to touch a nerve.
Still smiling.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have to do it myself, but I do see the frustration of my
Just tell
team
other people
all
to do
day
it.
long. No, the reality is we use AEB, but there are some really good software packages out there now that have probably quicker than the rest of us, because they've seen a commercial opportunity, picked up on the frustration, and now actually offer a really good. So we've lived through the pain. We've now got a very slick software set up, which actually does 99% of it for us.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. Isabel, I'll come back to you because you had a really relevant question that's relevant to all of you guys as well. I guess you're going through your level 4 apprenticeship. You might be staying with the same employer, or you might be looking to move on at some point. Obviously, Ali, you've had quite a varied career so far. So Isabel, you had another question about applying for procurement roles.
Just applying for roles. How would you stand out when it comes to the procurement and applying for that sector?
It's generic advice, which I was chatting to my new warehouse manager, who's believe it or not bounced around even more than me, because he's got about a 20-page CV, and I think I was teasing him about it the other day, and we ended up having a conversation about this. But there are two things for me. One of them is networking. The reality is, no matter how good you are or who you are, if you are one CV in a pile of 1,000, the chances of it getting read will always be slim. So if you can find any way, and LinkedIn's an absolutely cracking tool for this, to stalk different people, different companies, find some sort of connection to send somebody a message, or go to the different forums, go to your conferences, your events, all of that. The more people you meet and the more confidence you've got to just pick up the phone or send someone a message, because the answer is, at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen is someone ignores you. Who cares? Move on. So yeah, anything and everything you can do to network. I remember when I came to getting out of the military, that's what they said. They didn't teach us how to write a CV. They set up events. They introduced us to people. They taught us how to network. That was the main thing. The other one, when it comes to the actual CV piece, there are two sides to this. Understand all these systems they now use to pre-filter CVs. It's buzzword bingo, so make sure the adjectives in the job advert are all scattered in your CV. I had a mate years ago who was convinced that if you put them in like font size 1, he just copied and pasted all the adjectives out of the CV, put it into like a little bar at the bottom of his CV, sorry, the adjectives out of the advert, and put it in the smallest font size, and then put it in like white text so you couldn't see it. But he said if you do that, every computer system that looks at them and filters will pick it up. Whether that worked, I don't know. But the simple answer is they do IT pre-filtering, so that helps. And then if you get someone to read your CV, particularly in a supply chain world, it's statistics. You can use all the lovely adjectives in the world to tell them how wonderful you are. But when you say, I went here, I did this, and it delivered this value. And this was the conversation I really was having with my warehouse manager. Every single bullet point on his CV is, I did this, I rationalized this, I added this value, and it's all quantified. So any business that wants to hire you is looking for you to prove that you've added value somewhere else, that you'll then be able to do the same for them. The more numbers, the more statistics, the more data you can put in it, the better.
Definitely. That's brilliant. Thanks ever so much for that, Ali. Did we go round everybody, and has everyone asked everything they wanted to ask Ali? Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time. I found that really interesting, and I'm sure everybody's found it really, really useful.
Yep.
Thanks for taking the time out to be our expert.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Useful.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, it was my pleasure. So if any of you ever want to come down to Poole and see what we do at the RNLI, you now know me. So
Oh,
feel
that's
free to drop me
definitely
a
worth a
message.
visit as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ali.
Right, brilliant. Well, good luck with the rest of your courses.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thanks, that's been
Thanks.
brilliant.
Bye,
Bye.
Cheers.
everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye.